Let's see how the unrest is hitting Egypt's stock market. We're talking, of course, about the situation in Egypt and how it's impacting not only Egypt, but really also other emerging markets. Joining us to talk about it, Brandt. He's Director of Research at EPFR Global, which tracks $14 trillion worth of global flows in and out of mutual funds and pension funds. He's the author, by the way, of the firm's latest report, which found that emerging markets are under pressure from political risk, capital controls, and more. Cameron, good to have you here with Matt and myself. Talk to me about Egypt and how it's impacting global fund flows.
I think the best way of putting it is it's giving investors a motivation to do what they were already thinking about doing, which is booking some of the gains they got out of emerging markets last year and moving the money into developed markets, both for safety and because at the moment that's where the value is. A lot of these emerging markets took in so much money last year that valuations got stretched. Inflation was ignited.
Cameron, can I ask, isn't this, though, I mean, isn't Egypt, although a smaller part of the story, one of the countries that was seeing more and more international inflows? We saw that with Qatar and the United Arab Emirates and to a large extent also Saudi Arabia, that these Arab nations were getting more money from international investors. I mean, what is it as a percentage of the $14 trillion worth of investment flows around the world? Obviously very tiny.
It's very tiny, and also I would say those flows had already started to peak back in probably the third quarter of last year. I think anyone investing in Egypt was prepared for some bumps, probably not as much as we've seen, but it was becoming very clear that the tension between rising prices and the speed with which Egypt's admittedly impressive growth was trickling down were not completely in sync. There was a lot of strike activity, a lot of low-level unrest. So I don't think that a bump in the road in Egypt was completely unexpected among emerging markets, fund managers.
Cameron, it sounds like you said, folks were getting ready to do something. They just needed some kind of catalyst, whether it was Egypt or something else. Right. Does this, though, have the potential to be something more significant in terms of fund flows, depending on how it plays out in Egypt and whether or not there's a contagion effect in the region?
Yes, it certainly does. And the obvious channel would be things that put a real pressure on the price of oil, be it uncertainty about the Suez Canal or fear that what's happening in Egypt will spread into the oil-producing Gulf states. If that happened, given that emerging markets are already under pressure from rising prices and the problems that causes, that could have a very significant impact.
We should point out that the Suez Canal is open and running, business as usual there. And, we just talked to Dr. Fouad Ajami, who runs the Middle East Studies Department at Johns Hopkins. He was telling Carol and myself that the Army, which is very much in control of things like that, is progressive and not the type to overreact and shut down the Suez Canal. So that's not really expected, is it?
Right. No, I don't think so. And I think, honestly, that unless something really outlandish happens, the impact on fund flows and buying and selling will be pretty muted. We've already been through this last year in May with the unrest in Thailand, which people thought might spin out of control. And it had, it certainly gave an excuse for a bit of a sell-off, but the investors came right back when valuations moved down to sort of try and take advantage of them.
So, Cameron, bottom line, your advice to investors who are kind of watching this situation unfold, there's still many, many questions to be answered in terms of the future here. So what's your advice? Right.
Not to overreact. That's usually when investors are really sorry. And my sense of Egypt is that the institution most likely to be a part of a resolution is the Army, and it has a pretty good track record in terms of not being too radical.
All right, we've got to run. Cameron, good to get some time with you. Cameron Brandt of EPFR Global.